on Facebook Live, and we're on webinar, and we're here in person. Thank you all for being here, first and foremost. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm going to walk over here a little bit. For those that don't know me, I'm Jose Morales. I'm the Education Coordinator with Epilepsy Foundation of Texas. So let me introduce the foundation a little bit, then I'll talk a little bit more about what I do, and then we'll introduce Marissa and we'll get started, okay? So at Epilepsy Foundation of Texas, we lead the fight to overcome the challenges of living with epilepsy and accelerate therapies to stop seizures, find cures, and save lives. We were established in 1983. We provide a number of programs and services, including public and professional education and awareness programs. We offer camp programs, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. We have Camp Neuron, Camp Spike and Wave, and Camp Kaleidoscope. They're completely free to all of the children that go, so we're very proud of that. That actually just got done. I know Rebecca and our Suzanne Thomas were very busy the past couple of weeks. We also have a clinic. Our clinic is located right next to where we office at 2401 Fountain View. And then we have education services, which is what I do, and I'll go over that in just one second. So, as for me, I have two roles, okay? I am the education coordinator for the foundation, and I am the regional program coordinator for the grant that we got for the next 3 years. So let me break those down a little bit. As education coordinator, I go to different schools and different places around town. They call me if they, for instance, if they have children with epilepsy, they call me, I go out, and I teach the staff about what to look for. I teach them about 4 major seizures, which is tonic-clonic, simple partial, complex partial, and absence. We go over all those. We go over how to first aid all of those seizures in case, in case those children whatsoever seize while on campus, okay? Then as regional program coordinator, it breaks down into 3 parts. So as regional program coordinator, we do telemedicine, we're going to revamp our website, and we're going to come up with a mobile health app. And then, of course, the third part of that is our education programs, which I am in charge of, which is where we are now, right? So I've already done one on May 20th. We have this one today, and we're about to go over 2 more in just a little bit. So let me introduce you to our little handout folder here before we get into Marissa, okay? So in our handout, we have our survey here, okay? The survey is going to be very important. You're going to hold on to this until the end of today's presentation. If you fill out the survey, these are very important. Obviously, we are here for you. If you fill these out, or please do fill these out, then we can tell what we're doing right, what we're doing. If we're doing something wrong, we can definitely fix that. So please fill these out at the end, okay? So the next 3 handouts are going to be handouts on transition, telemedicine, and medical homes. So that's these 3 right here, okay? And these other 2 are important. These other 2 are important for you on Facebook Live. This is probably the first time you're going to see these right here. These are the flyers for the next 2 education events on August 12th and August 19th. So you will see these shortly on our Facebook page, okay? So on August 12th, we're going to have another presentation. It's going to be at the Pasadena Public Library. Dr. Fiki is going to present there, okay? So, and then on August 19th, we'll have our last education event. Dr. Michael Watkins, he's from Memorial Hermann Children's Hospital. He's going to do a presentation at the Mancuso Neighborhood Library. So you all can look over those. And as time goes on, as the weeks come, we're going to have them on our Facebook page, like I said, and we'll go over them a little more in depth, okay? So, lastly is going to be all of Marissa's handouts. Marissa has provided you all with a nice stack of handouts, which includes, she's going to go over all this, but seizure action plans, what to ask the doctor. She even provided like a list of medications, and we did do those in color. So most of the handouts are in black and white. But for those that aren't familiar, so this is what that looks like. She even provided a list of different medications so that you can tell. I thought that was pretty cool. Thank you, Marissa. And of course, the big handout here is going to be her presentation. So as we go through the slides, you're more than welcome. These are all yours, so you're more than welcome to write all over them. If you need a pen, let me know. I have plenty in the back, and that's that. So those are the handouts. Again, my name is Jose Morales. If you have any questions or concerns throughout the day, please feel free to ask. My director here, she's doing our tech. She's doing a lovely job. Thank you, Rebecca. She's doing a lovely job of handling our tech. So Marissa is actually RN BSN at Texas Children's Hospital, and I'll let her introduce herself. Here's Marissa. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello. So my name is Marissa. I am a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital. I am the program coordinator of the epilepsy program there. So I've been at TCH for about 3.5 years now. If you notice, I'm not from Texas, so I don't talk like I'm from Texas. I'm from Boston. So you might hear a little twang in my voice that's different than you're used to. So I've been TCH for just about 3 years now. I have been in the coordinator position for about 2. And before that, I was a nurse in the epilepsy program in the clinic. Before I came down to Texas, I was working as a school nurse up in Massachusetts, where I'm from. So that was my position up there before I came here. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective to bring to y'all today, because I was on the other side of some of the things we're going to talk about today, because I was the one caring for your children in school. So that being said, let's dive right in. I'm going to save plenty of time for questions and stuff at the end. So let's see how much we can get through of the presentation, and then we can go through questions and any concerns and things you have at the end. Excellent. Okay, so these are some of the things we're going to talk about today. A big chunk of this presentation is going to focus on medical needs. So I'm a nurse at heart, this is what I do, but a lot of what we're going to talk about is how to make sure that your child's medical needs are addressed at school. We're going to launch into a lot of paperwork, things that the school staff should have, seizure action plan, medication orders, and things of that nature. I'm going to talk today a lot about some factors that might impact your child's school performance, how to address academic concerns that you may have. Give me a little kickback there. And some tips for how to communicate with your school team. So an overview on epilepsy. These numbers always astonish me, no matter how many times I look at them. 2.2 million Americans, people in the United States, are living with epilepsy. So that's a really big number, which means that there are over 300,000 students in the school system with epilepsy that are being cared for by their school nurses, by their school staff, and that are in school dealing with seizures. So this is a condition that affects a large number of people. 1 in 10 of us will have a seizure in our lifetime, and 1 in 26 of us will develop epilepsy. So that's a pretty large chunk of the population. When we talk about epilepsy, we mean when a child or a person receives a diagnosis of epilepsy, what that means is the tendency to have repeated seizures that don't have another known medical cause behind them. So epilepsy, that's when epilepsy is diagnosed. I'm sure this is familiar to most of you in this room, but when we talk about seizures, there's 2 kind of main categories of seizures that we talk about. Jose mentioned this a little. So generalized seizures are seizures that affect the entire brain, and partial or focal seizures are seizures that arise from part of the brain. Generalized seizures, the most common ones that you may know of would be an absence seizure, and that's also called a staring spell. And so children that have this type of seizures might be doing their normal work or activity, pause and stop, be unresponsive for several seconds, and then resume their normal activity. Sometimes they can last longer, but most of them are usually pretty short. So it's a staring spell or an absence seizure. Tonic-Clonic seizures are what most people, I think, in the public would know or consider, oh, he had a seizure. This is a seizure when a child gets stiff and rigid and convulses or shakes. So that's called a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, or a grand mal seizure is another word for that. Other generalized seizures, so seizures that come from the entire brain, would be things like muscle spasms or falls. There are children that have seizures when they drop to the ground. Those are all types of generalized seizure activity. And then there are partial or focal seizures, so partial, part. These symptoms of these types of seizures come from where in the brain the seizures arise from. So the symptoms kind of relate to that. So the two main categories of partial seizures we talk about would be a simple partial seizure, which is also known as an aura. Does anyone know what an aura is? What's an aura?
When you get like a sense of something that knows you might have the...
Exactly. So sometimes a funny feeling or a sense you might get before a seizure happens. And some people have auras and other people don't. It just, everybody's a little different in that way. So that's one type of simple partial seizure. And then the other type is called a complex partial seizure. And the behaviors in this type of seizure can really vary, again, depending on where in the brain they're arising from. So this might be anything from repetitive chewing movements of the mouth or a clicking noise coming from the throat. Sometimes children pick at clothing or objects near them. They might mumble or say words that don't make sense or wander around. So everybody's a little bit different in how those seizures present. So those are complex partial seizures. So when a child is diagnosed with epilepsy, usually where we start with treatment options would be medication. So you'll see throughout this presentation I refer to medicine as AEDs or anti-epileptic drugs. So that abbreviation is used a couple of times. So medicine is usually where we start. There's a few ways that we use medicine. First, and very commonly, we use it for chronic management. So your children or yourself may be prescribed medication to take on a daily basis to help control and stop these seizures. Typically, they're dosed a couple of times a day. We space them out, and several of them rely on levels in the body. So that's why we dose them a few times a day. Ooh, that just clicked out. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, we'll keep going from here. Let me go over here so I can. You're gonna turn your camera around.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, change of pace. Sorry, chronic management of seizures. So we take those doses every time, twice a day, typically, sometimes 3 times a day, sometimes once a day, depending on the medicine. It's really important for people who take medicine in this fashion to take the dose at the same time every day without missing a dose. So that's critical. Make sure you're requesting refills ahead of time and giving yourself plenty of time to get that medicine. Because as we move later in the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about triggers or things that might bring a seizure on. And this is a big one that can trigger seizures. We also use medicine as what we call a rescue. So some children are prescribed medicines to stop a seizure that lasts a long time, or sometimes what we call clusters of seizures, so seizures that come back to back that aren't stopping. We prescribe an emergency medicine for this use. When medicines aren't stopping the seizures, we talk about other options, and there are plenty of them. So dietary therapy is a big one. We have a pretty big diet program at Texas Children's Hospital. The one you may have heard of is called the Ketogenic Diet, and this is a very strict diet that is very high in fat and very, very low in carbohydrate. And what it does is put your body in kind of this special state that can help reduce seizure activity. It's very tricky to stay on for those of us who like things like carbohydrates and sugar, like my large iced coffee over here. So it's very tricky. It requires a lot of careful monitoring by the parents at home and the school staff. And isn't right for everybody, but for those patients who they can work, it can be an effective option. The next 2 diet options are also great options because they're a little bit less strict than the ketogenic diet. So for children that might be a pickier eater or like me really enjoy carbohydrates, then they offer a little bit more flexibility there. So that's the low glycemic index and the modified Atkins diet can be really helpful options as well.
They are still really strict though.
Very strict, yes. Still very strict, yes. Medical devices is another thing that we talk about. So that would be, there's 2 here listed, the vagus nerve stimulator, which is an implanted device that gets implanted in the chest. and there's a little wire that goes up and wraps around the vagus nerve. And what that does is deliver stimulation up to the brain that can help reduce seizure activity. It comes with a special magnet, and the magnet can be swiped during a seizure or if an aura is happening, and the magnet, that extra boost of stimulation, can help reduce the length of the seizure or maybe stop it from coming on or not from lasting so long. And then there's the RNS, which is somewhat newer to the pediatric market. It's not approved in young children yet. I think it's like 14 or 18 and above. And this is a medical device that's implanted under the skull in the brain. And it delivers a stimulation when it detects seizure activity. So this one requires surgeons and your epilepsy team to be able to localize exactly where in the brain the child's seizures are coming from. And then sometimes we talk about surgery. For children that might have a lesion or something very specific in their brain that we know this is where their seizures are coming from, and sometimes we can go in and remove it or use a laser and ablate it, and there's a few different options there. So it's important to remember that lots of people with epilepsy go to school and live happy, healthy lives. For the most part, children with epilepsy should be in school, and they have a legal right to be in school. We, as the nurse and the school staff, are there to protect them and to keep them safe. They should be in school, and we need to make sure that they have the modifications they need to learn at the best of their ability. These are just a couple of statistics, but about 30% of people who are on medicine are going to continue to have seizures, and those are students that fall in the category. Sometimes we use the word refractory or intractable epilepsy. So these are students that might be taking more than one medicine. They might have a few different types of seizures. They may be the students that are on some of those diet options or have a medical device or surgery. So it's important to remember that epilepsy really has a spectrum, and there are some people that are able to take one medicine and be controlled, and then there are some people whose getting seizures under control is much more difficult. Some children outgrow their epilepsy, and it may not be an issue as they're adult. They could be off medicine. And also, like I said, some people have more than one type of seizure. So this is important to remember at school when we're creating plans. Sorry, this is kind of cutting off the top of my slides, but so this says addressing medical needs at school. My best advice, if you leave here with nothing else today, is try your best to communicate. I know this can be tricky with your whole school team. So my first step, I would try to see if you could sit down and have a conversation with the school nurse, the teacher, whoever the pivotal people in your child's educational path are going to be at the beginning of the school year. It's your job as the parent to advocate for your child and to help us to help them in the school setting. So don't be afraid to do that. We need to learn from you because you guys know your children better than we do. You know them better than anyone. So I would see if you can sit down, can you have a conversation, even over the phone, and address some of those medical needs and questions that are going to come up throughout the year. Set the pace for the year. Again, advocate for your child. Make sure that the school staff is aware of your child's medical need. In a big, huge school, one nurse, unfortunately, can't be in every room at every time. So the people that are going to be there on a daily basis are the teacher, the aide in the classroom, maybe if they see any therapists, or the gym teacher and things like that. So obviously, we always want to be careful about protecting health information, but it is really important that the people that are with you or your child in school know of this because they're going to be the first responder. Decide on the best communication method between you and the nurse and the teacher. So when I was a school nurse, this really varied depending on the student and the family. So I had some students who had multiple daily seizures, and we would keep a log for the family between myself and the school, the aide in the classroom or the teacher would keep a log of those seizures for the family, and we'd send them home at the end of the week. Other students had seizures that were better controlled on medicine and didn't have seizures quite as often. And so when they had a seizure, it was an emergency, and the family, wanted to know and should have the right to know as soon as possible. So we would take care of the child and make sure they were safe, and I would give mom or dad a call to let them know what was going on. So set up the expectation up front with the teachers and the school staff as best you can, and try to come to an agreement about how y'all are going to communicate. Is it a weekly written log? Is it a phone call? Is it, if you have questions, who can you reach? These are important things because you're the parent, you're the guardian of this child, and again, you know them better than anyone, but we all need to work together to make sure that they're safe at school. And then there's a whole bunch of paperwork. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but this helps to guide the school nurse and the school staff in what to do if your child has a seizure, and also outlines if they're on any diet plans or medicine orders, medical devices. We, as a nurse, can't do anything medicine-wise or device-wise without a signed order from a doctor. That's how our license works. So that's part of this. But we need to make sure that we understand what's going on with your child so that we can know what to do and take the best care of them.
Real quick,
Sure.
where do you get some of these paperworks? Does the school have them?
The school should have them, and they'll give them to you. They should. They're also available on the website, and there's copies in your packet today. There's everything you should need in there. But yeah, your school should have these forms too, and they're all on the Epilepsy Foundation website.
Thank you.
So medicines we talked about are typically the first line treatment when someone begins to have seizures. And medicine can be very helpful, but unfortunately medicine also can have a lot of side effects that go with it. And since seizure medicines work on the brain, because that's where seizures are coming from, the side effects that people may experience are related to sort of that. So some side effects are what we call dose related, and that means, let's say we start a medicine on one of our students, and they might experience some of these side effects while their body is adjusting to the dose, or perhaps the dose is too high for them, or it just might not be the best fit of medication. Sometimes once they get used to the medicine, or if we reduce it a little or switch to something else, some of these side effects go away. Whereas some of the side effects on the right are drug related, meaning sometimes, unfortunately, depending on the dose, regardless of the dose, we know that some of these are risks of side effects that come with the medication regardless. So things like hyperactivity, sometimes weight gain or weight loss, certain medicines can cause hair growth. Those are some things that even regardless of the dose, we can experience. And then the ones on the left, blurry vision, sleepiness, dizziness. I hear these very frequently when we start a new medicine because the body is adjusting to that, but these can also continue too. So I would encourage, if your child is experiencing any side effects, to keep working with your medical team and to find out what the best fit for your child is. We always want to, it's our goal as the care providers to balance the best seizure control we can possibly get with the least amount of side effects. And so sometimes that's a challenge. This says side effects on the top too. So it's important to remember that even mild side effects can have a really big impact on a student that's in school. So if you think we increase a dose of medicine, for instance, your child's having more seizures, we make an increase in a medicine, and they're feeling very sleepy, which we see this commonly. They go to school, and I promise you, 3 days later, I'm getting a call from the school nurse saying, Jimmy's very tired at school, what's been going on? And so we can't talk to school nurses unless you guys give us written permission to in our clinic. That's our policy. So if I have permission to talk to a school nurse, what I do is say, you know what, we just saw this student here, we made a little increase in medicine, let's see if we can give it a few days and see what happens, keep us posted. But we hear about this quite often, because if you think about it, anyone who's experiencing some of these side effects is not going to be at their best to go to school and learn. It's a really, really tricky balance. I addressed the second one already, but side effects can be unpredictable. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. So we just don't know. Sometimes behavior and mood changes can be really tricky to sort out, because sometimes they're related to the medicines and other times they're not. So that's something that, again, you guys monitor at home, we monitor in the hospital and in the doctor's office, and then also the school should be monitoring as well. And that trio of all of us should be communicating with each other about what's going on. Does anyone know what a seizure trigger is? You do?
Stress, lack of sleep.
Yes, absolutely. So a seizure trigger is something that might make a seizure more likely to happen. So things, exactly what you just listed: stress, lack of sleep. When I get a phone call to the clinic and someone says, my child's experiencing a big increase in seizures or had a breakthrough seizure, the first questions I ask all the time, Did they miss a dose of medicine or get it late, and are they sick? So those are two that are very common triggers for children that have epilepsy. You can see a lot of these on this list: stress, lack of sleep, hormonal changes, missed meals, things like this. Think about our adolescents and our young adults that are in school and dealing with some of these things. So they're up late because they're studying for finals, or they're stressed and late at basketball practice and doing all these things. So we really need to be careful about trying to avoid seizure triggers as much as possible. Encouraging a good night's sleep, eating a well-balanced diet, making sure that people stay hydrated, and the biggest one is medicine. Medicine, same time, every day. This says managing dietary therapy at school. So for students that are on a special diet at school, this requires a little bit of extra communication with the school team because, as was mentioned before, they're very strict. And so these diets require food that's either prepared by the family or specially approved by the parents. Often the parents are keeping a strict log and counts and things like that about what their child is eating because they need to stay on this diet to help with the seizures, and it is very strict and managed. So it's important that you guys work together. Again, this is the theme of the presentation, but work together with the school team to figure out what the balance is there. So can they eat food from the cafeteria? Can you work that out ahead of time? Should they only be eating things that you send from home? If they don't finish their whole meal, do you need to know about it? If they don't finish their liquids, do you need to know about it? And then there's a question about school events. So when I was a school nurse, I had a child in my classroom who was on a ketogenic diet, and his mother ahead of time had sent in some special cheesecakes that were okay for him to eat. And so when there was an ice cream party or a birthday party or something at the school, I would talk to her ahead of time, and she would give me permission, and she'd, count it into her daily allowance of the carbs, and the child was allowed to have one of his specially prepared cheesecakes while his other peers enjoyed a treat too, because we don't want anyone to feel left out because they have a medical need. So they need to be included too. So work together. Okay, now we're going to get into the seizure action plan. So this is in your packet too. I'm going to go through what this form looks like in a couple more slides. But we're going to talk a little bit about the process. So let me pull it out for you in the packet. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this form. Your school might have a slightly different version of this, but it looks like this. So for those of you that are joining online, there's the seizure action plan. And I'll get to, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. So the seizure action plan, like I said before, is the guide that tells me, your school nurse, what I should do if your child has a seizure. It's a medical order that's signed by the doctor, and so it gives me permission to treat your child if they have any special medicine that's being prescribed at an emergency basis, and what I should do. And it gives some background information about seizure first aid, your child's specific seizures. It's a great kind of all-encompassing document. This is going to be signed by your doctor and should be in place for every student at school that has seizures, regardless of whether they've had 2 in their lifetime or 3,000 in their lifetime. It's really pivotal that this is on file at school. It should, on the bottom, you can see as well, that should be signed by the parent or guardian. And what this does is ensures that everyone's on the same page. So the doctor, this is a form that ideally the parent completes as much of it as possible, but we complete and sign at the clinic and get sent either to you or to your child's school. And then you should sign it as a parent as well on the bottom.
And I'm going to add something because
Sure.
This is something that needs to be done every year.
Yes, it needs to be done. That's a great point. It needs to be done every year for a number of reasons. One, epilepsy and seizures change all the time. And we do this there are plans for children with diabetes at school or asthma at school. Medical needs change. We need updated information. Number 2, again, under our nursing licenses and things like that, things are only good for a certain amount of time. So we need updated signed information every year. That's a great point. Thank you.
Also, if they're doing after-school activities, don't that particular person need a seizure action plan? Because the nurse is not going to be there after school gets out.
Exactly. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but that's actually on this slide right here. Next slide. You are one step ahead of me.
Okay.
Is to make sure that, hold on just a second. Sorry. No, you're fine. So we're protected under the same, we protect your child's health information under the same privacy laws that if they're in the hospital or at school or whatever, there's privacy laws that protect your child's health information. So we would never, as the nurse or as the teacher, share health information with people that aren't on a need to know basis about your child. But I would really encourage you to make sure that all of the people that are involved in taking care of your child know about your child's seizure. So that was such a great point. After school care, the football coach, the swim teacher, things like that. All of these people should know because, like I said before, one nurse in a school of 5,000 kids isn't going to be there. And so it's really important that everyone knows and knows what to do.
Could it be like all your teachers that you see every day that let them know?
Yeah, it's up to you. I would because what happens if you have a seizure in one of their classes? And I think it would be important for them to know because they might be the first one who goes over to help you. So I think it's important to let people know. And you know, if you're able to talk to about yourself and your seizures and what they look like to your friends and things like that. Here's what might happen. If you see this, don't be scared. Here's what you can do to help me. So that's really great. Advocate for yourself. I think that's very important. We maintain a copy of this. When we complete this for you at your doctor's office, we keep a copy in your child's file. The school obviously keeps a copy, but you guys should keep a copy too at your house. And that way, again, it's that trio. The doctor, the school, the parent, we all have the same information. And this should be updated if anything changes. So if the medicine order changes or things like that, it's very easy. It takes us 3 minutes to complete this form for you at the hospital. It's not a big deal. The more challenging aspect is that we can't release information to the school directly without your written permission. So sometimes that process can take a little while because we need either you to provide us with written permission to send it to your school, or we need to get it to you directly. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't have a fax machine at my house and things like that. So we're a little limited into how we can get these forms back to you. So work with your medical team the best you can. So my favorite form out of all the forms in this packet is the parent questionnaire. Let me pull it out for you guys. I'll show you in a couple of slides. I have a slide about this of what it looks like. Questionnaire for a parent of a student with seizures. This is my favorite form. What this does for your school team is it's sort of like the seizure action plan, except it's not signed by the doctor, so it's not a medicine order or a special order. But it gives a lot of background information about your child's seizures. So this is great. If your school doesn't provide you with one of these, your nurse will be thrilled if you bring this your first day of school and it is completed. I'll show you what it looks like more in a couple of slides, but it goes into treatment history, demographic information, what all the types of seizures look like, if there are any specific triggers that affect you or your child, so that we can know about them at school and try our best to avoid them. So this is really great. Some other things to think about. Triggers I just mentioned, transportation issues. This is something that I get asked a lot of questions about. What should I do about the school bus? What should I do about field trips? So these are things, each school district has a little bit of a different policy about this, but I would inquire with your nurse and your school staff about what's the plan for the bus. The bus driver is another person who should know about your child's seizures. Yes?
So I don't know if we'll be getting into this at any point, but one of the issues we have at school is with the recovery period. So we get calls a lot where, you know, there's no more seizure activity, but he's you know, sleeping in the nurse's office for, you know, if he sleeps for more than like 30 or 45 minutes, they call us to come and pick him up.
Right.
And my feeling is that, you know, there's a lot of issues with that. Well, he may recover just 5 minutes after that, and then he's missing out on the rest of the school day.
Right.
You know, we're having to leave work to get him. You know, all kinds of issues. But are there any? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are legal protections for him to be in school, but I just, you know, I don't know.
Does he have a 504 plan or an IEP or anything like that?
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's something that could be addressed in that. And I would talk to your school kind of group about that. That's a question. That's a really good question that I should have put in here because I get calls about that all the time at clinic. And it's a delicate balance because, so I can speak to you as a nurse, I would want in a student that's just had a seizure and is very sleepy, I want to be able to monitor him and make sure that he's okay. But one nurse, unfortunately, in a busy nurse's office, I can't give one child, one-on-one attention. So there's a number for an extended period of time. So it's a really common question that comes up, and I would talk to your school team and figure out if you guys can come to some type of an agreement about. I've been involved when it's an hour, let them rest for an hour, and if not an hour, the parent needs to come and get them. But this is a huge challenge for you guys as families because you have jobs and careers and other children and all sorts of things. So we've got to try to come to an agreement and see both sides, but sometimes it's not a clear-cut answer.
Okay.
That's a really great question.
Like you said, like with the bus and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I would go on field trips and the teacher would have my diet stat.
Okay, great. That's a good, I'm going to talk about that in a second because every school has a little bit of some different rules about emergency medicines and diastat. So Texas, like the state I came from, for instance, we could not, under my nursing license, I couldn't train someone else to give that medicine. But here in Texas, it's a little bit different. And so the nurse, depending on the school district, might be able to train someone, like your teacher, to give you the medicine if you need it. So that can be helpful.
I didn't know that.
Depends on the school and depends on the nurse, so every school is a little bit different. It's kind of so I also teach a training kind of similar to this to school nurses. And one of the biggest questions that comes up every time that we talk about is field trip and medicine issues. We call it delegation issues about who can give the medicine.
The biggest issue that I came with her, with the diet, and I know you said you'll get to it, is finding someone willing to even do it.
Right.
Because a lot of times, especially if you have a female and it's a male person in charge or the opposite,
Right.
I've had to say that it's not a sexual act. You're not doing anything.
It's a medicine that she needs because she's having a seizure and it's an emergency.
Right. I mean, if she's diabetic, you're going to give her insulin.
Absolutely. So I get a lot of questions. I have a slide on diastat in a second, but I get a lot of questions both at my job at Texas Children's and when I give this training to teachers and nurses about diastat and questions. The most important thing to remember, for those of you who don't know, diastat's a medicine that's given in the rectum. So it's an emergency medicine. It's Valium that's given in the rectum. It's one of the most commonly prescribed emergency medicines. But some of the issues we have with that is we want to protect privacy. So if there's a student that's having a seizure in the cafeteria and needs to have this medicine, how can we make sure that we're going to protect that person's privacy? Because I would want my privacy protected just like all of you guys would too. So it's a little bit complex, and each school's a little different about their rules about who can give it and who can't. So I would talk to your nurse and their team because I know the field trip stuff is always tricky. The bus driver who keeps the medicine, because technically it's a controlled substance. It's Valium. It's something that we send special to your pharmacy. So there's all sorts of issues about that. Does it need to be locked up? Does it not? So work with your nurse and the teachers about that.
She was very lucky, and it's not with school. It's with
There you go.
camp.
Prepared. I love it.
When she
I
was
carry it
in,
with
Carry it with you and all the time. Don't keep it in your car though. That's one thing. Don't leave it in your car. Keep it with you because it's perfect.
It goes with me.
perfect because
she
it's so
went to
hot.
when she went to camp,
Mhm.
and I'm actually still friends with the person, there was someone who was in charge and carried a backpack, and whatever
Right.
camp she was in,
That's
that
where it was.
person was
Right.
a counselor in that camp. Whatever field trip she went on,
That's
that
where it
person
was.
went on the field trip with
Right,
her.
right. And carry it with you. If your child is prescribed it, where your child is, that medicine should be. So if you can pick up a couple of refills and have a few of them, if, grandparents or if, they're with dad on the weekend or whatever, everywhere that child goes, that medicine should be because that's what you're going to do if there's an emergency and it's really important. So sometimes we'll have parents that will come to clinic and their child will have a long seizure and I'll say, okay, do you have the medicine? You ready to go? Oh no, we don't have it. And that's the biggest thing. Make sure if your child has emergency medicine, that medicine should be with you because that's going to be,
My daughter's service provider has one.
Great.
I have one, and the school nurse has.
That's great. Good. I'm glad. Another couple of things to think about as you're kind of gathering info for the school would be safety. So like I talked about, some children have seizures where they might fall or seizures where they may wander or not be able to communicate clearly. So make sure if your child has any of those types of medical needs, we're thinking about these. Do they need a helmet because they might fall and hit their head on the table? What are some kind of safety methods? A couple other things we talked about, most of these, the field trip issues we talked about. Seizures in a wheelchair. So a wheelchair is actually a really pretty safe place to have a seizure because you're strapped in. So if anyone has a child that uses a wheelchair, I would encourage you, unless it's an emergency, they should stay in the wheelchair, but I would loosen things like a chest strap or anything they may bang against or hurt themselves, and only really get them out of the wheelchair if it's becoming an emergency or they're unsafe. Seizures in the water. I do get a lot of questions about this too, so this is big. So people with epilepsy should not swim by themselves. They should be very, very careful in baths. I wouldn't lock the bathroom door, things like that. Very, very important, because if they were to have a seizure in water, they could drown or get very injured. So very critical. Anyone who has a seizure in water, even if they seem okay, our recommendation would be to bring them to the emergency room to get evaluated. And the reason that is because, I don't know if you guys have heard about this secondary drowning. There was a child recently who inhaled water and then appeared fine, and several hours later got very, very ill. So what can happen is you can inhale water and seem okay for a little while, and then very quickly have a lot of trouble breathing and be in trouble. So even if your child seems okay, if they have a seizure and they're in the water, I would bring them to get evaluated just to make sure everything's all right. We talked a lot about this bottom stuff already, special things you might need at school: diet orders, BNS, magnets, and medicine. So pull out this questionnaire thing. I want to go over this with you real quick so you can complete it and bring it to your school nurse. So the top part goes all into just your demographic information, the child's neurologist, any other medical issues they may have. The next section is all of the child's types of seizures. So I will not lie to you, we get a lot of these sent blank to our clinic requesting that we fill them out. And they come both from parents and they also come from school nurses. So we don't fill these out because this is for you guys to fill out. So we'll happily do a seizure action plan and get our medical stuff taken out. But if your school wants one, and I would encourage you to do one of these for your child's school, you guys need to complete this. And you should know everything that's on this sheet. It goes into triggers. Have there been any changes in your child's seizure pattern? First aid information. Again, what's an emergency for your child? Is it they haven't had a seizure in 5 years, so one seizure would be an emergency? Or maybe they have seizures more frequently and a seizure that lasts 5 minutes is an emergency, or multiple seizures that won't stop. Everyone's a little different. Seizure medicines are on here, and emergency medicines as well if they don't have any. If your child isn't prescribed any emergency medicines, then the standard care that we would recommend at when we fill these out, it would be a seizure lasting 5 minutes, or if seizures aren't stopping, or certainly anytime there's a seizure with injury or trouble breathing or things like that, we're going to call 911 and get some help there for your child because we want to make sure they're safe. So this is a really great form. It also talks on the bottom all about things like recess, bus transportation, communication. What's the best way we should communicate? So most of what we're talking about is all on this sheet. It's really great. It's the second page. The seizure action plan we talked about, it's similar to the questionnaire sheet, but it's what gives us the outline of how we should treat your child if they have a seizure. The last thing that's in there is a seizure observation record, and what this is we can use this at school, you can certainly use it at home. It's a really easy way because you can just kind of put check marks in all the boxes of symptoms that you see during the seizure. So I used to keep, for the children I worked with, I would keep a log in their file with their stuff at school, and if they had a seizure, I would check this off, and this is how I would document and keep track of what I was seeing. You can certainly use this at home as well, but you might want to, your nurse at school may have one of these, may not. Again, it's here in your packet.
So this is set up for like one seizure?
Yep, each column is a seizure, exactly.
Okay, so they only have enough for 3.
They only have enough for 3 on every
sheet.
sheet.
If it has more than you might need to give them 2 or 3.
You might need to give them a bunch. They can make copies. They can use it if they want to. They may have their own way to track seizures, but it's kind of it's designed to be kind of user friendly. So you can check off exactly what you see. So
I'm actually, this is my last year of high school.
Okay.
And I'm starting college and next year. Could I use this at college?
You can. You'd have to figure out who could help you to fill it out.
Right.
That's the thing, and I don't know who would be the best resource for that for you.
Can I give it to a nurse though?
If there's a nurse that would be able to see you and college is a little bit different because in college you have a lot more independence than when you're in high school and there's a nurse in the building at all times. College is a little bit different in that way. So I have it on the slide at the end, but my best suggestion for those of you that are going off to college would to get right in touch with the disability office at your campus and to start working about all the needs that you have and how they can help you the most. So that's great. I'm so glad to hear y'all are going off to school. Okay, medicines at school. We talked a lot about this, but if your child needs a medicine given during the school day, we need an order from the doctor in order to give that. And this should really be saved for medicines that need to be given during the school day. So seizure medicines that prescribe twice a day, morning and night, it's really preferred if you try to schedule those doses so that they're given at home. But of course, we're happy to give medicines when it's needed at school. These are things that need a lot of seizure medicines, especially in young kids. We dose 3 times a day, so they need a midday dose, and that's fine. Certain medicines for ADHD need a dose at school. There's a number of medicines that we're happy to give at school. Emergency medicines as well, that's a big one. So it's your responsibility as the parent to help empower us. We need you to bring us the medicine that's enough to give it, enough quantity, not expired, that's a big thing. And the instructions on the bottle or the packet of Diastat or whatever should match what's on the medicine order.
What happens, and there may be nothing to go around, when she has something, I do contact the children immediately. We're about to transition to adults, so hopefully same thing. But a lot of times, whoever her doctor is will say, give her an extra dose of this, give her an extra dose of this, you can wake her up while she's sleeping and give it to her to stop the cluster one. That's not really something you can do at school, can you?
So at school, no.
Okay.
Especially if we're talking about, I think college will be especially a little bit different for y'all to sort of navigate, but if we're talking about children in an elementary or a middle school, high school arena, we're going to call the parent when it gets to that point. So where our orders are within a certain, that seizure action plan dictates what we do. If we're feeling like it's headed towards an emergency, we need to call the parent and we do our best. If we give the emergency medicine, usually the policy is we send them to the hospital. And that again goes back to the monitoring. We can't provide them the monitoring, the safety monitoring at school that they need. So we need to get them evaluated. But it's up to you, the parent, to work with your medical team if you're noticing breakthroughs, if you're noticing an increase, to work on medicine. We have talked a little bit about Diastat, so I won't go into this too much. The biggest thing to know, so Diastat, if y'all haven't ever given Diastat and your child has prescribed it, or if the school nurse needs to give it and has never given it, their website is great and has a video on there as to how you should give it.
Should we print one of those out?
So there's one in your packet, and I used to have them in my previous job, I ended up being a supervisor of some of the other school nurses, and for those that had never given it, I put that with the Diastat, and I especially made sure that the other people in the school that were trained to give it had that with them. So it's not challenging to give.
Is it in the other paperwork, or?
It should be, I think it's in the packet. I think it's in here. And it's also available online. Diastat.com has all of this stuff. We also have them at Texas Children's. If you ever need one, we can give you them. We have it in English and in Spanish. It's the very last page in here. It's always nerve-wracking to give this medicine. It's always nerve-wracking when it's an emergency. So the more you're familiar as a parent, the better, and you can, be quick to respond. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about, I'm sorry these slides are cut off, but it says factors that impact the student with seizures.
I'm missing that one.
We don't have this packet slides.
I'm missing that.
You're missing this part of the slides?
Yeah.
Oh,
You've been
okay.
missing since
Okay, well maybe that's something we can get to y'all, or maybe you can post it somewhere or something, the whole slide deck, especially because at the end I list a lot of I'm sorry? Yeah, you can, I don't care. You can take pictures. Especially towards the end, because I list a lot of resources that might be helpful, so maybe we can get these all to you somehow so that you can have access to write them down. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk more about some of the academic impacts and some factors that might impact people that have seizures. So we talked a lot about seizures themselves. So a person who has seizures might, and also their after effects. They may not feel well after, they may be sleepy after, and may not be at their 100% best to learn at school. So that can certainly impact. Impacts are listed on the right there. Side effects we talked a lot about. These medicines affect the brain and unfortunately do have side effects sometimes. Some people who have epilepsy have an underlying brain abnormality that is causing their seizures, and that can have an impact as well. as well as things like other medical conditions or attitudes, beliefs of the family, of the community. All of these things come together and can have some impacts on what's listed on the right here. So things like quality of life, behavior, learning at school for sure, their achievement and self-concept. These are all really important, and all of this sort of comes together. And again, I would encourage you guys are monitoring and looking for these things at home. We're keeping an eye out at school as well, and at the doctor's office. So all of us need to be on the lookout for some of these things and try to work together to see what we can do to make it better. So as I mentioned before, it's really important to remember that a lot of people with epilepsy go on to lead happy, healthy lives. They can go to high school, college, have successful careers, and a lot of children with epilepsy are able to go to school, and that's really great. Having epilepsy, though, does put you at a little bit higher of a risk of having some issues with learning sometimes. So as many as about 2/3 of children with epilepsy have some type of learning issue, and that can really vary. Like we talked about the spectrum of epilepsy. It could be something very mild, like a child that might need a little extra help with reading or with math, to a child that might have some more intensive needs and might qualify. We'll get into a little bit of special education services and need some more support at school. We talked a lot about medicines, but medicines themselves, again, can pile on to some of this school stuff. And sometimes it's tricky to sort out. Is what's happening seizure related? Is what's happening medicine related? Is this another thing that's going on with my child? It can be very complicated. Sometimes these learning problems can go on even if we get the seizures under control. So then it's time to, that's great, the seizures are controlled, but we need to address the learning problems too and get that person the help that they need. This is ADHD in students with epilepsy. So for those of you who don't know, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And that can be seen in up to about 40% of children with epilepsy. What ADHD is that diagnosis is made in a person who might have trouble concentrating or paying attention and completing tasks because they're unable to focus on what they're doing. It's a medical diagnosis, just like epilepsy is, and can be helped with both medication and different behavior modifications. And it's important to remember that a person with epilepsy responds to the same things as a child in this realm as a child without epilepsy. So medicines can be helpful. These types of educational modifications can be helpful. It's important first, though, before we diagnose anyone with ADHD, your doctor, and it kind of depends on the practice whether this is kind of headed up by the neurologist, or sometimes the pediatrician can help with this type of a diagnosis. But it's important first that we rule out seizures and other medical reasons. So sometimes in people that have absence seizures, or those seizures where they might stop and have a staring episode and stop their activity for a little bit, sometimes those can be mistaken as, oh, she's daydreaming or zoning out, when really it's seizure activity that's happening. So we need to make sure that we're addressing what's really going on. I would encourage you to work with your medical team. This is really important, and work together. Talk to your doctor if, let's say your child has been diagnosed with ADHD and a medication has been recommended. Make sure, and this goes for any new medicine that your child is prescribed, if your child's on seizure medicines and has epilepsy, you should try to run those by your neurologist or whoever is prescribing those medicines for your child. Some things can interact. For the most part, most ADHD medicines are fine, but we want to know what else your child is taking so we can make sure that nothing's interacting and it's not setting them up for more of a risk of having seizures. So this talks a little bit about emotional and social development up on the top. So there's an association between epilepsy and the following. Sometimes impaired self-image or low self-esteem. Sometimes people with epilepsy can struggle with anxiety or depression, or might have trouble with social development. So these, again, are really important things to think about and to support in the person themselves with epilepsy and you guys as the whole family. Again, this is similar to what we already talked about, but once we get the seizures under control, sometimes this stuff can linger and can really have an impact. So we want to make sure that moving on, we can get you all the support that you need. So if you're noticing any of these things in yourself or in your child, there can be a number of resources that can help you. I would start with your medical team first, and also school can have a number of resources too. We have 3 full-time social workers in our clinic who are wonderful at providing resources to families and to people with epilepsy. Sometimes therapy can be really helpful, or visiting with a counselor, and some people end up needing perhaps medication just prescribed by a psychiatrist, or help with a psychologist as well. Support groups are big. I'm going to get into some more specific resources in a couple more slides, but support groups. I want you all, as not only people in this room that might have epilepsy themselves, but as the caregivers as well, try to take care of yourself as much as you can, because you guys you have a lot going on. You have a child with a medical need, and need to take care of yourself as best you can. So don't be afraid to reach out for resources. I know a lot of families get support on social media from the Epilepsy Foundation, from other families with their child's specific diagnosis. So if you're that kind of a person, don't be afraid to branch out to other people in your community. I'm really glad y'all are here today, and maybe you guys can touch base.
I just would like to add here too,
Sure.
is like communicating with the doctor, especially about anger and depression issues, because there's supplements that you can take that'll help with that.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Thank you for pointing that out. We want you to keep us in the loop about stuff like this. We want, like I said before, seizures are in the neurology office. We want to try to get seizures under as best control as possible, minimizing side effects and maximizing quality of life. That's really important to us. And so a person with epilepsy is a whole person, and we want to treat all of these things. This says seizures and school performance. We've already talked about most of these things, but it's important to remember that seizures that happen at home or at night, as well as seizures that happen during the day, can have an impact on school performance. So a child that might be having seizures while they sleep or at home overnight might be tired or not at their best to go to school and learn the next morning. So this can really have an impact on school. And we've talked a lot about the medicines and stuff in the bottom. Some people with epilepsy have an abnormality in their brain, and that's what specifically causes their seizures. So sometimes this can also be associated with some learning problems. And this really ranges, just like the spectrum of epilepsy. Sometimes these might be specific deficits, and things, like I mentioned, might need extra assistance in math, or might have issues with attention, to kind of a more global impairment, or a student that might need more services and more support. Or it might have an intellectual disability or a developmental delay, and might not be reaching all of those milestones at the same time as their peers. So there's really a wide variety of what we can see. This says primary laws that apply to students with epilepsy. So anyone with epilepsy and with a disability in the United States is protected under laws. So children with epilepsy have a right to be in school. They're legally entitled to be there, and they need to be provided with an education that's appropriate for them. So there are 2 kind of groups this falls under, 2 laws that this falls under. So you may be familiar with some of these, but the first one is the American with Disabilities Act, and it's Section 504. So what 504 says is this applies to public schools, anyone that's receiving federal funding, and it basically says that individuals with disabilities can't be excluded or denied the opportunity to receive services from these programs. So appropriate accommodations must be made so that these students can be in school. The bottom part is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And this is where special education falls under this window. So this is appropriate for children that might need more support in school. And this guarantees an appropriate public education to students. This is where special education falls. So it's at no cost to the child's family, and it's dictated by something called an IEP, or an individualized education program, which kind of sets forth all the needs of the child, and outlines what the outcomes and measurable things we're going to measure throughout the year should be. So 504. 504, basically, like I said before, is special accommodations provided to a student that have a documented medical or mental health need that prevents them from impacts their learning. So this would be appropriate for students that, for the most part, are able to learn at the same level as their peers, but need a little bit of extra support in doing so. And the accommodations on a 504 can really range. This could be anything from extra time taking tests to an extra set of textbooks at home, things like that. It can really range. These are put together by a group at your school that would help y'all with this, and they're reviewed yearly, and then they reevaluate every couple of years. This says special education services. So for children that might need a little bit of extra support, that a 504 plan might not get them all the services they need, they may fall under this window of special education. And what special education means is really providing modifications to the curriculum so that a child can achieve and learn at his or her best. So the ARD committee, you may have heard of that, but the ARD committee is who at the school, and parents are included in an ARD, admission, review, dismissal, outlines what services the person qualifies for, what are their specific educational needs, and how are we going to measure them? What are the outcomes that we're going to look for? So this is a committee that meets once a year. You would meet with all the members of this team and go over your child's outline. Have they met these goals? How should we change things for the next year? And the IEP is really what dictates all of that. Sometimes there are medical forms that go within the IEP and other health impairment form. You may have seen that. That can help us give your child more services. So things like PT or OT, if they need them, can be covered under all sorts of different things. And the IEP, there's some forms in your in your folder, about transition. So check those out too, because for children that have an IEP, transition, so meaning getting your child set up for the next phase, the adult world, should start to be addressed in an IEP by the time your child is 14. So that should all be in there. There's a really great, the first few things, I think it's in the beginning of the packet, some checklists about if your child is in special education and needs some additional support. So what should you do if you think your child is struggling in school? First of all, we'll skip to the bottom here. I would get everything in writing. So I think this is really important to make sure that you have everything in writing. I'm going to give you in a couple more slides. There's some resources about, you can find sample letters online to request assessments and for services. So don't be afraid. I would keep good records. Everything you can get your hands on a copy of, keep a binder. Nothing impresses me more than when I have a parent that comes to an office visit and seizures, okay, here it is, education, here's where we're at. Keep records. This is so important for you guys, for your child. You are the advocate. So I would start with the teacher in school if you're noticing things. If you're not getting the support that y'all need, keep moving up the chain. So go from the teacher. I would start with school resources. Can you talk to a counselor? Is there a social worker you can speak to? And then move up the chain to principal, school district, and then again, your child is protected under certain laws. It kind of depends where they fall. That can help you too. So I'd start in the school, see where you can get, and then go from there. Again, important to remember, you guys are advocates, and we all need to work together to make sure that your child is safe, happy, and learning at school to the best of their ability. So that's the goal. We're all on the same page. So this really works the most smoothly when we can all come together. I would really encourage you to try to develop positive relationships with the children, with the staff that are going to take care of your children, because they're your eyes and ears during the school day. You guys take great care of them at home, and we value your trust in us to let us take care of your child during the school day, but we got to work together, and that's important. So try to maintain positive relationships, open communication. If you have disagreements, that's okay, but let's try to work them out. I'll give you some tips for that in a second. But again, try to keep records of everything. You do have a legal right as the parent to agree or disagree with the services that are provided to your child. So there's a couple of tips later on as to what to do if you disagree with the services that are being provided.
And ultimately, it's up to the parent what gets included in the IEP.
I think the parent has a big part to play.
I mean, that's what the school tells us.
Right.
Where these are just suggestions to you.
Absolutely.
You can
and that's your right as a
accept
parent.
Or deny any of them.
Exactly. College, we talked a little bit about at the beginning, but for those of you who are going off to college, I would start with the disability office at your college and see if you can get some assistance with the types of accommodations that you may need there.
As a parent of the college level,
because they are legal adults.
Right.
How involved do they let the parent be?
I think it depends.
Because we did all the 504 meetings. Like, I have all this documentation and I have all this stuff.
Right. So the most complicated thing is she's an adult, so it's the protection of her health information and who you can talk to, and can they call you if she has a seizure? Do they need signed release from her? So like how it works at Texas Children's is
Actually,
once
yes, they do, because we did fill that
exactly.
out.
So once children get to a certain age, we really need to be speaking to them and not to their parents anymore, and that's because they're legal adults. And so if
There
they're
aren't even some high school seniors at this point
legal adults, exactly.
Yeah, we've been locked out of my chart. We can't get in it.
Exactly. When you turn 18, Texas Children's locks you out of my chart because they're a legal adult now. And so it becomes, it's a whole other level of complication. I'll be totally honest with you, I don't know a lot about kind of the college process, so I'd encourage you to talk to your disability office at the school, and there may be some of these resources might be able to help you a little bit too, to figure out how to navigate. But you're not the first mama that's told me that is, what do I do? I've been, helping take care of my child the whole life. It's wonderful. I'm so happy she's going off to school, but are they going to call me if something happens? What do I do?
There's
I
a
would just-
medical emergency, they probably would, but any
Right.
other thing, no, they're not going to.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And I would just add that we have a transition education coordinator within our foundation. Her name's Naomi Meyer. So I think Jose has given you his card. If you call the same number and ask for Naomi Meyer, she might be able to help you with that transition from high school to college. And we do have transition education starting up in October, the first Saturday of each month. So 12 and up and parents are free to come. And I know we have some parents who can talk to you about transition education as well.
And then at the support groups, there's other parents too with college age, or other families, college age adults, not kids, and their parents.
Yeah, it's tricky. But just like Rebecca said, some of that transition planning and all of that information, the foundation has a lot of that. And Naomi can be really helpful in sort of planning all of that because it's complicated. It's really, really complicated. So if you disagree with the services that are being provided to your child, there's a few things you can do. So I would start with whoever in your school is kind of your contact for the services that you're getting. Is there a 504 coordinator? Is there a school diagnostician? Who is kind of guiding the ship there? And I would start there and then again work up the chain. This link on the bottom here, so Texas Project First, is a really great website and gives a lot of information. I'm sorry that y'all don't have this part of the slides. But has a lot of great information about, there's a whole link in there I was reading about dispute resolution, how to kind of work through these types of issues at school. They have a lot of information on their site that could be helpful about navigating the special education system. This is another great resource, so the IDEA manual for parents, for those of you with children in special ed. It's put out by the ARC of Texas, and this is a really great resource. It's kind of lengthy, but it's in Spanish and in English. And it has some really good tips in here on how to navigate the system. Sample letters you can use about things like disagreements or requests for services. There's some really great info in here as well. There's a lot of resources within this manual, a list at the end of all sorts of resources that could be helpful for your family. And my favorite part was kind of, they have a like a breakdown, like a dictionary almost, of what all of these different terms mean. So it's really great. These are some advocacy resources for you all here. You may be familiar with some of them, but the ARC up at the top it works on school advocacy to parents within the special education system. Texas Parent to Parent is a parent support network. Same with Project First. Project First, that was the website I was referring to, but it's a really great website. And on the bottom is the Epilepsy Foundation. So Rebecca obviously just talked about their transition work and all they're doing within that. There's a lot of other things that the foundation can provide. So first of all, information. There's a ton of information on their website. I wouldn't be afraid to check that out. They run support groups, therapy, art therapy. We have medical clinics, and then also my two passions. So I also work with the Epilepsy Foundation, like I said, and I train school nurses on how to care for children at school with epilepsy. These trainings are available online on their website too. Okay, we lost our slides.
Jose, do you want to check with the gentleman who was helping us?
Let me see, I've got
Albert.
paper copy somewhere. Sorry. Okay, so the Epilepsy Foundation, sorry, a little technical difficulty. The Epilepsy Foundation can provide school nurse training support. The trainings are online. They're really neat. And there's also one for school staff on there too. So actually when I was a school nurse in the school we used this training. And that's once a year we trained our school staff. It's a much briefer training than the one I do with the nurses. It's like an hour, probably less than that. And kind of goes through some issues. Because again, it's not the school nurse that's in every classroom and in every situation. So we want teachers, aides, everyone else to know what to do if your child has a seizure. My favorite thing that the Epilepsy Foundation provides is their camp. So for children with epilepsy, they provide a camp at no cost to families. There's 3 of them throughout the state. And I went to Camp Spike and Wave this year. This was my 3rd or 4th year, I think, in a row now. And I work on the medical staff there. And it's wonderful. It's really exciting to see these children out. And my slides went away.
Like the computer went off?
Like the computer went off that they're hooked to, I think.
Or the projector?
That's okay. We're almost done.
So can I add another thing? I'm
Sure.
not out loud. I'm sorry.
No,
but this
please.
is just my chance to like throw it out there. But we have a friend with a child with juvenile diabetes,
Mhm.
and their camps allow siblings to come. I mean, there is a cost, but it would be nice, especially with epilepsy and swimming involved, to have that security of a sibling there to watch them.
So they
And also, my child with epilepsy is a younger one, so he doesn't feel comfortable going. He's said he doesn't want to go.
So there's a couple of options.
I know there's the winter camp.
There's the winter camps that we take siblings. And if you're worried about swimming, I know that's the biggest issue. Since we're in Houston, I'm going to speak about Houston, but this is true for all of our camps. We are very serious about the swimming issue. So we have counselors that probably about 20 counselors around the pool.
circle the pool at all times.
And they are-
excited to see.
Lifeguards, they showed pictures,
There's
there's a
lifeguards.
lifeguard sitting in the chairs,
Yeah.
and then like about every 3 or 4 feet,
So-
there's somebody standing
Yeah,
right
so
there,
the
all
counselors that
around the
are
pool.
standing on guard are not allowed to play. They're not allowed to talk. They are looking for seizures. Then there's counselors in the pool playing with the kids. So there's counselors in the pool, counselors outside of the pool. If they see a seizure, they jump in, and then everybody else comes in. The lifeguards we have 4 lifeguards, I think, at Spike and Wave. Yes, ma'am.
So, we're talking about recreational swimming, but is it recommended to steer clear of competition swimming or team swimming? in
I
any
would
way?
work with your medical team, but for the most part, I think you'll get the answer of we want people with epilepsy to live,
To do it.
do a lot of things
My
and go live
daughter's
your
in
life.
Special Olympics, and whenever they go to Special Olympics, if they have seizure, they
Right.
have to have a band. So all of the judges know whoever has a band, they know to be more alert to that
Exactly.
particular person, to watch out for seizure activity. Because when they're moving their arms, you're seeing
Hard
this
to tell.
bright fluorescent orange or whatever color it might be that time. They'll know to watch out for those particular ones.
And I would
I don't know
also,
about any other swim activities, but I know for Special Olympics they do.
Our son has done swim team too, and the thing is with swim team, they have stroke judges who are watching them all the time too, and timers so there's 4 or 5 sets of eyes. I know it's still difficult, but there's 4 or 5 sets of eyes on just them
Right.
at all times, just for watching to make sure their stroke's right, that they're not disqualified and all kinds of stuff.
and just like we talked about at school, I would encourage you to make sure the swim coach knows about your child's medical needs, make sure that people that are there are gonna know so they know what to look out for.
And I always make sure and tell people in the lanes who are watching them when he's about to start.
That's great.
I went to a camp like my mom said, and that lady helped me, and she would watch me. If I was in the deep end, at 7 feet, she'd watch me over there, and she'd circle around every once in a while.
And make sure you were safe.
Yeah.
I like that. That's great. And make sure I don't swim by yourself. Children with epilepsy, don't be in water by yourself. Make sure there is someone with you.
We're having the problem right now. We agree with you. I've taken the locks off the doors, you know, because she's slammed them before, and then that happens. So we have a rule: knock 3 times, and then I get to come in because I don't hear from you. But at 18, we're having a problem right now. You know, last week I was told to my face, you are going to have to learn how to let me take a bath by myself without you being home. And I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't.
Listen to your mama. And it's really different. Did you? In the water?
No, I said it would be so nice if they actually got some sort of seizure.
I know. It's such a complicated issue because, I mean, you don't want your mom, you know, keeping your eye on you when you're in the bath. I mean, but just understand it's for your safety, and that's the big thing. We want you to be safe at school. We want you to be safe at home, and that's the big thing.
She has had a seizure in the water. I mean, I heard a scream, and it was a scream I've never heard before. You know how we as moms, we know our babies cries. We know when they're hungry. We know when they're this. It was the scream I'd never heard before, and I ran in there, and she was going under. You know?
That's great. Okay, a couple more, wrapping it up. This is a great legal resource should y'all need assistance with sort of disability rights, and they're really wonderful. Real quick, just a couple more. We've talked a lot about this, but extracurricular activities we just sort of touched upon. Our kind of big guidelines would be, I would try to avoid really high contact sports the best you can. Work with your medical provider and see, you know, kind of what they recommend. We talked a lot about swimming, so be cautious with swimming, but, you know, people with epilepsy can swim for sure, but they need to do it safely and they need extra eyes and extra help. Climbing, we usually say to avoid things that climbing, especially in children that have seizures that aren't as well controlled. Be really careful with anything that's high. Make sure anyone that's with your child knows about their medical needs. This is the same if they go to a sleepover or they're with grandma. These are important things that everyone needs to know what to do so they can jump in and help. We already talked about camp. And then last but not least, at home, things that you can do so that your child can perform their best at school and at home and in life as well. Number one, avoid those seizure triggers if you can. We're going to try to do it at school, and you should try to do it at home the best you can. Make sure they're getting a good night's sleep. I get a lot of questions about screen time and computer time, video game time, TV time. This is a tricky thing, I think, for all parents. I'm not a parent, but it seems like I know there's a lot of parents that it's really tricky to limit the amount of time on phones and on computer games. So do the best you can. To limit that. For some people, it can be a seizure trigger. For others, that it isn't. But for the I would say the same thing to any parent. Do the best you can to limit screen time. Encourage getting out and playing. Eat a well-balanced diet. Medicine, please, please, please take medicine as prescribed. Make sure if you need refills, you're calling us in enough time that we can get it to your pharmacy. Because it's really tricky. Sometimes we can't get it there the same day. For a number of reasons, especially in things like controlled substances. It's hard to get there. So give us enough time to help you.
Can I add also on the physical activity, because there's a few studies out there that indicate that physical activity is one of the things that can help with seizure control.
That's great.
So make sure they're active.
Make sure they're active, and especially in the Texas heat, staying well hydrated. That's a big thing we push at camp all the time. It's really it's tricky because it's so hot out, but do the best you can to
so
kind of balance
found
that.
Also that hydrating with like you know, it doesn't have sugar in it. It's and it's multiple minerals. It's a electrolyte.
Oh, like electrolyte tablet or a
no,
drink
it's
that
powder that we use with his
Okay,
strength,
excellent.
So we find that helps too.
So just kind of wrapping it up, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, children with epilepsy should be in school. And participating in activities, participating in life. We want to work together with you all as parents in the doctor's office and the nurse and teaching staff at school to make sure that your child is reaching to the best of their abilities. Some children with epilepsy need additional educational support, and it's really important to make sure that their medical needs as well as their educational needs are being met at school. Please do your best to try to collaborate with all members of the team. I know this can be tricky, but it's really pivotal, and the smoother we all work together, the better the outcome your child's going to have. And that is it. I want to just thank especially a couple of my coworkers at work, Dr. Schultz, who does a lot of transition work for the Epilepsy Foundation. She's phenomenal. And our social worker in the clinic really helped me put a lot of this together. So they were really great resources. So I just want to open it up to questions and find out any comments, any questions, anything I can help with.
I do have some questions from the webinar.
Okay.
The first one is, what are your thoughts on training everybody at the school, hall monitors, teachers, professionals, bus drivers, like the whole school?
I think if you can get your school to agree to do it, I think it's wonderful. I think the more people that know, because 1 in 10 of us are going to have a seizure in our lifetime. That's a big number. So it's not only for children we know of with this. I was in CVS one time and a person fell down and had a seizure on the floor of CVS, and everyone else, I mean, it's scary to watch a person, especially convulse and have a seizure. And I went right over and they called EMS and it was me that was down on the floor. This is when I was in nursing school. The more people who know, the better. So if you can work with your school and see if it's something, the school I worked at, we had a lot of children with seizures, so we provided it to everyone. I know it's not the same for every school, but bring it up, talk to the nurse and talk to the teachers.
Like a training day or something.
Exactly. A lot of nurses, I know a lot of nurses, like we're going to HISD in a couple of weeks and we'll train all the HISD nurses. So there's a lot of schools that do.
Pasadena ISD does that or not?
I don't. Do you know if Pasadena does it?
We haven't gone out to training in Pasadena in a while, not since
How
I've
would
been
we
there.
go about setting that up? Talking to your school nurse?
Yeah, you could suggest it to the nurse. It's on their website too. The training itself is on the website.
Yeah, Jose goes out and does school personnel training.
Talk to Jose.
Yeah, talk to
You can
Jose.
Set it up at the school.
Yeah, and you would need to
This
talk
kid was seizure free for 3 years, and then we switched meds because she was getting older. We went to pill form from liquid, and that's when she had a 20+ minute seizure and everything. So
Yeah, I would talk to Jose and see if you can get something set up and see if it's something your school staff would be interested in.
I know they teach the nurses and a few of the head,
What to do.
but I would like all of them. But
I would
sometimes
too.
you're in the hallway and
I would too.
the teacher that is your homeroom teacher
Right.
knows, but your math teacher don't know, or a hall monitor like she said.
Exactly.
Do you have any reference for the ketogenic diet where we can learn more about it, like percentage of people it helps? How does it help for a year, 3 years? Do most people it works for 3 years but then doesn't work?
So I don't know like those specific details at all, but I would talk to your healthcare provider about it for sure and see if it might be an option. They can provide you with all sorts of resources. There, I know there's information online. I can't remember the name of
Danny
the
did would have some information.
which one?
Charlie Foundation.
Charlie Foundation. That's what I was thinking of. The Charlie Foundation is the big website that would have some more information about it.
Just to help him a little bit, my son was on the ketogenic diet for 2 years, and it took a few months for it to take some kind of effect, but it did not eliminate his seizures completely, although it did reduce them. But the reason Dr. Schultz was she was in charge of it, by the end of the 2 years, his cholesterol was so high, she had to take him off. So it's
Because it's very, very high fat, so sometimes that can happen. And it's very closely monitored, so we monitor lab values, we monitor urine ketones to make sure that the body's within this steady state at all times. So it's everything is weighed out. It can be very, yes, that was the right word, exactly. But it's sort of like a medicine, and sometimes in some people it can really help, and others it doesn't. But it's a great option. It's just very, very strict compared to the other two diets, which are also strict, but not quite as strict. Keto, everything is weighed out, everything is tracked on a daily basis. It's tricky.
it was worth it.
Was
as
it?
far as I'm concerned.
That's great.
But
So after the 2 years and you went back to normal, whatever,
his
they
seizures
increase?
didn't get worse after he got off the diet.
Okay.
That's for sure. But they're not gone completely, so we're still working medications.
You can learn a lot more about the diet. I would talk to your doctor, but sometimes the diet, we don't stay on the ketogenic diet specifically forever because of some of those other concerns that can happen. And so it's usually, some children do, but there's in a lot of children, we keep them on it for a couple of years and then slowly wean off. And it seems that sometimes the effects still continue after the diet is done. So
Remember the threshold is higher now, or I guess lower.
lower, higher, yes.
Yeah. Higher threshold.
Yes, did you have a question? That's a great question, thank you.
Going back to the partial seizures,
Mhm.
you're saying that my son exhibits some of the traits that you mentioned,
Mhm.
and he's been diagnosed with Tourette's.
Mhm.
Now, how can I tell if it's Tourette's or if it's, because he exhibits several
Some of those
He said
things.
picking at clothes, he picks at a skin or a button. He also makes this clicking noise or like a grunting noise.
So I
How would I know
think
if that could
I
be
would
a
talk
seizure
to
and
your
he's
doctor.
misdiagnosed?
They might want to do, I mean,
Because his sister has seizures, so I thought
Right.
maybe he might.
right. I think some of those things, some of those behaviors, it can be tricky, for instance, in children with autism too. Think of children with autism
He
that,
has Asperger's.
okay, so, you know, they may have repetitive behaviors and things like that. Usually when it's seizures, it's a repetitive, something repetitive. So.
I notice whenever he's stressing, he does it more.
But that could be common with Tourette's too. So I would talk to your doctor and see
I just
and
make
see
sure
what they
he hasn't
recommend.
misdiagnosed.
No, that's a good
Okay.
question, and
You said it was
you're being a
ding,
good
ding, ding,
advocate
ding, ding,
for sure.
like-
I would work with your medical team and say,
I think that's the hardest part right there, you know, is
Getting the right
the
diagnosis.
co-diagnosis is, you know, we do. We've got ADHD, we've got Asperger's, we've got
Right.
epilepsy, we have very weird epilepsy, we have new daily persistent headaches, we've got, you know, it goes on and on and on. And I think that that's one of the hardest things is saying, what is this and what is this?
what's this? And how do you navigate? I hear that from a lot of families. How do I navigate? You're seeing 5 different doctors for all sorts of things. How do you get everyone?
More than one Dr. Bluebird.
Right. How do you get everyone to communicate? How do you get everyone to be on the same page? How do I know if this learning or behavior issue is because of this, or is it from medicine? Is it from seizures? And unfortunately, it's not a clear-cut pattern. It's really tricky to navigate. Exactly. So there are just so many things that combine into this picture.
One of the things that I would have you look at in your folder is this little brochure. It's about care coordination and how you know what's another way to do care coordination. This specific building that we're at is called the Center for Children and Women, and it's called a medical home. And the reason why it's called a medical home is because they are very focused on care coordination. So everybody talks to everybody within the system. And so it's something to think about. This is not the only medical home. If you look up patient-centered medical homes online, you can see some others. But it's definitely something to think about because having your primary care physician know what your specialist is saying, it could be a life changer. So just making a plug for that.
Okay. Right now I'm trying to figure out, I guess it's kind of a horse before the cart situation.
Mhm.
Like, I don't really know if my daughter has ADHD, and I don't want to put it on her just because our oldest has ADHD,
Mhm.
but she exhibits the symptoms. And I don't know if it existed before and we were just so used to her personality because she's just been this way out there her whole life, or if it is, you know, because of the epilepsy, because of the medication. So we were looking at this coming school year, putting her on a 504, but how do you maneuver a 504 if you don't specifically need the longer testing periods or the special services that are typically offered? Like, I'm looking at it primarily because last year she had transitions in medication, and there was the heightened hyperactivity,
Okay.
you know, not fully knowing what was causing it. She's very inquisitive, so there was always questions, but then there were repetitive questions, and so we had conversations with her teacher as we were experiencing these things, letting her know about the changes in medication, letting her know about the epilepsy diagnosis in general, and the short-term memory, and all that good stuff. And for the better part of the year, until I was like, I can't handle this anymore, the teacher literally said she felt like she was being attacked. And so her remedy for it was to give Shelby P's and conduct. So we were looking at the 504 plan more so to, within the system, protect her. But she's actually done very well. She's very competitive and very determined. So she's had seizures and gotten up and gone to school the same day and all that good stuff. So she doesn't need all of the special education facilitation. But I do think she still needs the 504 plan in place to protect her against, you know, for lack of a better word, someone who is ignorant to what epilepsy does to a child or can create in the classroom.
So the 504 plan is going to give accommodations that are specific to her. So it's going to give you, it's not going to list things if she doesn't need extra time on tests or things like that. It's going to be a plan that's going to help her specific needs. So that's a process that you need to tackle kind of with school and figure out what does she need accommodations or what can be listed in that plan under what she needs specifically. So it's not going to go into things that aren't going to help her. So I would work with, if you're talking about doing it, is there like a diagnostician or the teacher or someone you can talk to at the school?
I don't think so. Like last year when we went to the school to talk, they seemed just very HISD. They seemed to lack. The nurse was at best familiar with diazepam.
Okay.
But just in general, diagnostician or sitting down and bringing her in or us coming together as a group, like when we attempted to do that with their school support specialist, whatever her title was, but it wasn't diagnostician.
Okay.
She just kind of was nice but not knowledgeable.
Okay.
So it was like
Maybe a compliance coordinator? Like, because our school has a compliance coordinator. We're in Fort Bend, but that's her title. She's the one who we contact if we want to have well, he's not 504 anymore, but before, if we wanted to have a 504 meeting or an IEP meeting now, she's the one who I contact. And
I'll
she
have
sets everything up.
to figure out her title, because when we went in, it was more so us being forthcoming with information so that they would know what they were dealing with, and they just didn't seem to have anything to give back. Now, I have a really good friend who is a diagnostician in the district. She's the one who actually made me aware of the fact that we could have a 504 plan if we wanted to, but she hasn't herself dealt with children who have epilepsy. All of hers has been other, learning difficulties.
So one thing I would suggest, so we do, HISD is very good. Every year they do train their nurses on epilepsy. So they are very good about that. So I'm glad to hear that she knew Diastat. That's a plus.
We did it.
Yeah, we did our job. I wish I knew more. But so HISD is very good about that. But in specific with your school, what I would suggest is one thing, you might be able to put it on your IEP that the school personnel are trained, at least the school personnel that are with your daughter. So that could be an option. And then the same thing that we were talking about with Pasadena, getting them connected with Jose and getting that training set up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like she has nocturnal seizures, but
It's
we
still
actually had an incident where the teacher literally left her in the classroom alone by herself to watch something, and it took everything in me and the heavens not to attack. But I'm like, if we're talking to you and if we're telling you,
right,
what's going to register with you?
And we're more than willing to come with you on a one-on-one meeting too, if that would help, just to answer any questions about epilepsy and be there as an advocate for you as well. So we'll do 2 more questions. We have one in the back.
Yep.
And
one more thing I just want to add to that too is also to utilize your clinic resources too. So if you give us written permission to talk to your school nurse or to the teacher at school, I do that frequently with families when we get into kind of these situations, and I'll say, if you're comfortable, sign a release. I'm happy to talk to the nurse about, more info about epilepsy and the teacher about epilepsy. We just won't do it without your permission.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask her, did she talk to the school counselor?
That's a great point.
Because a lot of times the school counselors can put you in touch with somebody that's higher up.
I'll stick around for two.
So
that can come in from
unfortunately, I did
outside.
talk to the assistant principal, who also is not familiar with all of this. There is no actual counselor. Their counselor left at the early part of the year, and they never fill the
The
position.
school counselor came and she has a list of people that she can bring in to help you.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
At school, but they
I
don't
love how
counselor.
everyone is collaborating. That's why this is so great.
Change phone numbers.
I
I
know.
know.
This is great. Okay.
Okay, I have one more online question.
Okay.
So it says, my son is in elementary school and he has partial seizures that manifest in different ways than what people generally think as a seizure. The issue we have in his school seems to confuse some activity as behavioral issues or him listening or not listening and following directions that could actually be a seizure in his case. We have seen these at home. Is there any advice for what we can do to help the school be more understanding and open-minded about other types of seizures?
That's a really good question. So number one, that's where all this training comes in. And so if people who are taking care of your children understand what different types of seizures look like, then that's a great thing. So all the resources that you just talked about, I would encourage that. Work with Jose, see if you can get the training of your school staff. Number two, if there's questions about different types of events, could this be a seizure? Could this not be a seizure? I would talk with your medical team and they may have tests that they want to run. Could we do a long EEG and kind of figure out what's going on? So that could be really helpful. And then number three, as you just mentioned, the paperwork that we have here can be really helpful too, because again, you're the parent advocate. You know your child's seizures better than anyone. So I would encourage you to tell all the staff with your school, these are some things we're seeing. This might be seizure activity, you know, and work together. So that's a really good question.
And Jose does training, just for everybody online, Jose does training in Houston, but we have education coordinators in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in West Texas. Marissa's actually going out to West Texas to teach nurses in Midland. So we can get out and we can train anywhere. So I encourage you just to contact us and see what we can do. There's also online training for school nurses and school personnel. So, and they can do that anytime in their pajamas. They can stop it and come back to it. So, you know, we always encourage online too.
Can I add to that also that I feel like the 504 or ARD committee meetings are great places to talk about the different kinds of seizures that are happening so that everybody's on the same page about what they're experiencing.
And it's all those important people all around the same table. That's a great point.
Okay, we're going to let Jose wrap it up for the
Okay.
people online.
All right,
And
thank you, Marissa. All right, so I'll get back over here. Dan, did you want me over here? Yeah? All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We definitely want to thank Marissa. Thank you very much for the talk. Thank you for coming out. A couple of thank yous. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice to meet all of you. Thank you for sharing all your stories, and it was really nice.
All right, so a couple of thank yous. We want to thank the Center for Women and Children. We want to thank Dr. Stephanie Martin for kind of getting the ball rolling with the Center for Women and Children. We want to thank Dr. Joe Roth, who was with us this morning. She let us in. I want to thank my director, Rebecca. She's kind of she's been doing the tech all morning and figuring things out for us. So definitely want to thank her for all that stuff. We want to thank you for being here. Thank you all for coming out this morning. So just a couple more things. So as I said, we have the talk on the 12th. I went through it this morning, but I'm just going to reiterate it. We have the talk on the 12th. Dr. Emeril Fikis from the southeast side, Clear Lake area, Bay Area. So he's going to be talking at Pasadena Public Library, just to reiterate. And that's for you all. And we'll be going over that a little more in depth as the week goes on. And then on August 19th, we have Dr. Michael Watkins. He's from Memorial Hermann Children's Hospital. He's going to be doing the talk at Mancuso Neighborhood Library on Belfort Avenue. So there's that. There's a little bit of a preview for you guys. We're going to be going over that as well. So you have my information. You have my card. If you have any more questions or concerns after today, you can definitely feel free to call me or email me, and I'll be able to, I'd be more than happy to assist you in anything. If you want me to come out to your school, call me or have them call me. You can call me or have them call me or send me an email, or if you want me to call them or send them an email, I'm more than happy to do so. If they need training, if your son or daughter is at that school and you feel like they could benefit from the training, then I'd be more than happy to reach out, or you can give them my information and they can reach out to me. Okay? So lastly, I think that's all the thank yous. Did I get everybody, Rebecca? Yeah? Okay, good.
There's a bunch of resources and info back here too. Feel free to check it out. There's a lot of great stuff over there.
Right, so I do have a resource table in the back in case you all have not. I'll give you a few minutes before I break that down. I think we're all good to go. So lastly is the survey. For anyone who's not here, this is just what a survey looks like, okay?
And they can fill it out online. They have it there.
Okay, so yes, we have it online, so you can fill out a form online. It just goes over what we've learned and how you feel about the program today, okay? So we definitely want you all to fill this out. We would greatly appreciate it. By helping us, it helps us help you even better. Okay, that's it. Okay, bye-bye, guys. Go this way. Yes. Oh, and we encourage everyone to speak amongst each other.